Two fake HOA enforcers kidnapped a teen skater in broad daylight, flashing phony badges and threatening his father. They'd been bullying families across the county, pretending to hold power no one gave them, but they messed with the wrong parent. Eric Dawson runs the town jail, and he set a trap they couldn't escape. Just wait until you see how he flipped the script, and why justice hit harder than they ever expected. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday in Cedarbrook, the kind of early spring day that smelled like cut grass and barbecue smoke. Eric Dawson, 43, was spending the afternoon doing what he looked forward to all week, filming his son Tyler at the local skate park. The two of them had been building a YouTube channel together over the past year, and while it hadn't gone viral yet, it gave them a reason to bond beyond homework and dinner. Tyler, just 15, had real talent. He could land a kickflip over a bench like it was nothing, and Eric, camera in hand, always called out the moment he stuck the landing. They were halfway through filming when a blacked-out SUV rolled up and parked just outside the concrete bowl. At first, Eric didn't think much of it. Probably another parent, or maybe someone curious. But when two bulky men stepped out wearing navy polo shirts with HOA enforcement stitched in block letters, the entire mood shifted. They weren't smiling. They weren't walking over casually. They were striding with purpose, straight to our Tyler, who was still coasting to a stop on his board. One of them, a thick-necked guy with a sunburnt face and mirrored shades, pointed at Tyler and barked, "Hey, off the board! This is restricted HOA property. No skating allowed." Eric blinked. "Sorry, what HOA? This is a public park, isn't it?" The second man, wiry and twitchy, flashed something that vaguely resembled a badge, cheap laminate in a folding wallet, and snapped, "Don't play dumb. This area's under community regulation. We've warned enough kids." Tyler, confused and out of breath, looked to his dad. "I'm sorry, but this isn't private property," Eric said, his voice calm but firm. "We live 2 blocks down. There's no HOA here." That was the trigger. Without another word, the first man grabbed Tyler by the wrist and yanked his arm behind his back in a rough hold. "We're done with warnings," he growled. Tyler let out a panicked, "Hey, what are you doing?" As the man shoved him towards the SUV, Eric stepped forward instinctively, heart pounding. "Hey, that's my son. You can't—" The second man stepped between them and pulled something from his waistband, shaped like the taser, but Eric couldn't tell if it was real or a bluff. The threat was enough. "Back off, sir. Last chance," the man said, low and tense. Eric froze, not out of fear for himself, but because he didn't want to escalate the situation and risk Tyler getting hurt. He raised both hands slowly, locking eyes with his son, who was being forced into the back of the SUV. The whole scene lasted maybe 40 seconds, but it felt like a bad dream, one where your legs won't move and everything's just a few seconds too slow. Then the SUV sped off. People had started gathering by then. 2 teenagers had pulled out their phones, and a mom pushing a stroller was already dialing 911. Within minutes, a real police cruiser arrived, lights flashing. But the damage had been done. The SUV was gone, and so was Tyler. Eric stood on the edge of the skate park, phone still clenched in his hand, shaking, more from disbelief than fear. His son had just been taken by strangers pretending to be law enforcement, in broad daylight, in the middle of their own town, and no one had stopped them. Eric Dawson had never felt rage like this before, not in the service, not in the courtroom-style hearings he sat through as a city director, and not even when his late wife passed, leaving him to raise Tyler alone. But this, watching his son be taken by strangers in mock uniforms while the real police arrived minutes too late, was a different kind of fury. It was cold, it was quiet, and it was starting to focus into something dangerously clear. At first, he tried to keep calm. He gave the responding officers every detail he could remember: the make of the SUV, the names the men had used, if any, what they wore, the direction they drove off. But the moment that stayed with him the longest was what one of the officers said when Eric demanded action. "Sir, you were not the first." That stopped him. "What do you mean?" Eric asked. The officer sighed. "We've had a string of these, fake HOA security. Sometimes it's just warnings and harassing kids. But last month, a teenager in Monroe Park got taken in a van, then dropped off miles away an hour later. No IDs, no prints, no trace. We think they're trying to enforce their own kind of community justice. But legally, they're nobody. And we've had trouble sticking charges. Eric's jaw clenched. So, you know who they are? We've got names. A group calling themselves the Civic Standards Initiative. Mostly ex-HOA board members, security washouts. They're organized, but not official. And unless we catch them red-handed, it's been hard to prove intent. That's when the heat behind Eric's eyes turned into something sharper than anger. You know who they are, and they're still out there. By the time the officer finished taking his statement, Eric wasn't just mad. He was furious, because deep down, he understood what this was. These men weren't confused. They weren't overstepping. They were targeting kids, immigrants, renters, anyone they thought didn't belong. They'd created a fake enforcement unit for one reason, to feel in control. But what they didn't know was that Eric Dawson wasn't just anyone. Long before he was a city procurement director, Eric had been a logistics officer in the Army, specializing in infrastructure and site security in conflict zones. He knew how to track movement, find paper trails, and more importantly, how to dig into local systems without setting off alarms. That night, with a cup of black coffee on his desk and a silent house around him, he opened the city's traffic cam portal using his department credentials. It took him 40 minutes to triangulate the footage from nearby intersections, matching timestamps from when the SUV left the skate park. There it was, black SUV, partial plate visible. He cross-checked it against vendor files the city still had archived from the last 2 years. One result pinged, a contractor that had submitted a bid for municipal facility services last spring. A bid that was rejected. The contractor's name, Winfield Regional Services. Their business license had expired, but not before they'd quietly offered security logistics to more than one residential development with failing HOA structures. Eric clicked deeper. The vehicle was registered under a sub-entity listed in the procurement database. And that sub-entity's last listed facility contact, the Cedar Brook Correctional Trust, the town jail. The same jail Eric now oversaw under a public-private lease structure the city had signed last fall. Eric leaned back in his chair, his hand still gripping the mouse. He didn't smile, but something inside him, something calculating, clicked into place. They'd taken his son, but they'd done it in a town where Eric controlled more than just contracts and traffic cams. He controlled where people like them ended up when justice finally caught up. And he had just enough authority to make sure justice didn't take its sweet time. Eric didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay in bed with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the skate park. Every second Tyler had been in reach, but just out of help's way. He wasn't just furious. He was focused. And for someone with his background, that kind of focus meant one thing: action. He didn't call the police again. He knew better. Bureaucracy moved slow, but Eric didn't need permission to act. He already had the keys to the kingdom, or at least the back gate to it. Instead, he picked up his phone and called Sam Bledsoe, the man he'd personally hired 6 months ago as deputy chief of the Cedar Brook Detention Facility. Sam was a straight shooter, former state corrections officer with a record clean enough to frame. More importantly, he was loyal, and he despised people who wore fake badges. Eric's voice was quiet but sharp. "We've got impersonators. They grabbed my son, and they're going to walk unless we catch them doing it again." Sam didn't ask for evidence. He didn't ask why Eric hadn't called the sheriff's office again. He just said, "Send me what you got. I'll prep internal intake." By mid-morning, they had an internal detainer directive ready, an obscure, rarely used clause in the town's municipal oversight rules allowed Eric, as a senior civic contractor, to issue temporary holds on anyone engaging in fraudulent conduct on town-managed property. It wouldn't hold in court forever, but it was more than enough to stop these guys in their tracks the next time they stepped wrong. But Eric didn't want to wait, so he set a trap. That afternoon, he filed a facilities use permit under a secondary account, completely legal, and had a temporary skate obstacle delivered to a vacant patch of pavement beside the community center. The lot had no signs, no gates, and no HOA jurisdiction. It was fully owned by the city. It was perfect. Then Eric created a flyer. Pop-up skate demo Saturday at 3 p.m. open session. Bring your boards. He didn't attach his name. He didn't use Tyler's. Just a burner account, some hashtags, and a geo-tagged location posted in all the usual local groups. Word spread fast. 2 days later, at 2:55 p.m., the kids started arriving, mostly local teens and a few parents with lawn chairs. Eric stood nearby with a clipboard and a reflective vest, looking every bit like a harmless volunteer. Sam, along with 2 corrections officers in plain clothes, waited in an unmarked cruiser tucked down the block. At exactly 3:12 p.m., the black SUV rolled up. Same vehicle, same tinted windows, same 2 men in those fake HOA enforcement polos. They didn't hesitate. They parked, got out, and headed straight for a group of teens practicing tricks. One of them, George, the broader one, snatched a board out of a boy's hands and started yelling about unauthorized activity on controlled grounds. Eric didn't blink. He tapped his earpiece once. Within 10 seconds, the trap closed. 2 cruisers rolled in from opposite sides of the lot, boxing in the SUV. Sam stepped out first, badge visible, calm but firm. "Gentlemen, step away from the minors. Hands where I can see them." George looked up, confused. "We're HOA safety. We're allowed to—" Sam raised an eyebrow. "With this?" He held up the flimsy laminate badge one of the officers had just taken from the man's belt. The lettering was crooked. The logo was stolen from a Google image search, and, unbelievably, the badge read HO Patrol instead of HOA. There was a long silence. Then Eric stepped forward from the crowd, arms crossed. "They made a mistake," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They thought they could play cop in the wrong part of town." Neither George nor his partner resisted. Maybe they knew they'd been outplayed. Or maybe it was the look in Eric's eyes, calm, sure, and absolutely done waiting for someone else to handle things. They were placed under arrest for impersonating public officials, unauthorized detainment of a minor, and trespassing on civic property. The charges weren't minor, and they were processed not at the county jail, but at the very facility Eric himself had the keys to. He didn't even need to speak. Justice had already started to turn. The story went public within 24 hours, and it spread faster than wildfire. Local news stations ran headlines like, "Fake HOA enforcers caught in sting operation, orchestrated by city official," and "Teens kidnapping leads to takedown of rogue vigilantes." A short clip of the takedown, filmed by a bystander, made its way to social media. Within hours, it had over 300,000 views. In the comments, parents praised Eric Dawson by name, calling him everything from a true public servant to Dad of the Year. Eric didn't ask for attention, but it came anyway. What shocked the public most wasn't just that the 2 men, George Lister and Paul Crane, had been impersonating HOA officers. It was that they'd been operating for over a year, harassing families across 3 different neighborhoods, detaining teenagers, threatening immigrant homeowners, and issuing fake citations, all under the guise of community enforcement. Now they were facing multiple felony charges, impersonating a public official, unlawful detainment of a minor, and endangerment. No more empty warnings, no more anonymous SUV patrols, no more fake badges. The moment they were booked, the corrections facility processed them through standard intake. No special treatment. But in an ironic twist of fate, when George Lister tried to file a written complaint from his cell, alleging harassment by staff and misuse of municipal power, the document didn't just float into the system. It landed directly on Eric Dawson's desk. He read it once. Then again, just to make sure he was seeing what he thought he saw. At the bottom of the form, in block letters, Lister had scribbled, "I demand an internal review by the facilities board." Eric pulled out a red pen and stamped it clean across the page. Rejected. That single word said everything. But justice didn't stop at accountability. It turned into real, visible change. Under Eric's guidance, the City Council voted to reallocate funds seized from Lister's sham HOA Civic Fund, which investigators found had collected over $90,000 in illegal fees from frightened residents. The money went toward expanding and improving the Cedarbrook Skate Park. New lights, a smoother concrete ramp, safety rails, even a shaded bench area where parents could sit and watch. At the grand reopening, Tyler cut the ribbon. No press, no podium speeches, just a crowd of kids, some good music, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing the space belonged to them now, and always had. Eric received letters from families across the county. Some asked how he'd pulled off the sting. A few local officials from neighboring towns asked if he could consult on their own community safety issues. His answer, whenever someone asked what made the operation work, was always the same. They forgot one thing. I don't just oversee city contracts, I sign the lease on the jail. For Eric Dawson, it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure that no one else's kid got pulled off a sidewalk by people pretending to hold power they didn't earn. It was about taking that fury from part one and turning it into something tangible. Justice wasn't just served, it was scheduled, documented, notarized, and walked through the front door in handcuffs.